this video, I'll be discussing how I became smoke-free in 60 days. It's not a how-to or an instructional video, as it only highlights my own journey. But I hope that you might find something helpful in it that you can take with you on your own journey. Giving up cigarettes is hard, and it's hard because, truthfully, you're an addict. You're addicted to nicotine. And as with any other addiction, the root cause, in this case cigarettes, will fight you every step of the way. Deciding to quit smoking is the first and one of the hardest steps to take in a long line of steps, some being big and some being small, but every one of them is one more step away from cigarettes. The start of your journey is the decision to give up smoking, and at this point you're most likely still smoking just as much as you ever have been. So the only choice to make here is how you're going to achieve becoming a non-smoker, whether that's going alone or using a support network as I did. I've tried many times to give up smoking and had said to myself many times more that I was going to quit. But I'd always tried to do it alone, and it turns out I have very little willpower, so going alone was never really an option for me. I decided to use the NHS Stop Smoking service and attended my first appointment, and I was treated to a friendly, no judgment discussion on how to go forward with my plans to quit smoking. I received a lot of good advice and suggestions on how to replace smoking with less harmful distractions, as well as my first prescription for patches and a nicotine replacement mouth spray. After a lengthy discussion, it was decided that these were the best methods of nicotine replacement for me, but it may be that other products will work better for you. The first day being a non-smoker was very hard. The patches were great and they were doing their job. But my hands were empty all the time and I wasn't going for a cigarette like I had been doing before, and it felt like the day was dragging. And although the patches were working, there were definitely some strong cravings. One of the methods of distraction mentioned in my appointment was making scale models, something I had done many years prior. And I decided to go grocery shopping straight after my first appointment because I wanted to avoid going into shops for a few days once I started the process of quitting, to avoid any temptation. And there in the centre aisle, like a sign from the heavens, was a model of the Titanic. So I went ahead and bought it. I decided that rather than blasting through a model in one day and being left without a distraction till I got another one, I decided I was going to make it a project, painting it and making it look as impressive as possible, to be more of an achievement I could connect to giving up smoking. This, it turns out, was a good idea for me, and the longer I went without cigarettes, the more time I could spend on something without the need for smoke breaks. I also used the money I saved, not smoking, to set up a dedicated hobby space. During the first appointment, I was required to use the carbon monoxide breathalyzer and blew an 18, which indicates a heavy smoker. There was a slight sense of embarrassment when my habit was put into numbers like that, and the booklet they give you highlighted that with a colourful chart. But this would be a key factor in my process, but more about that later. So at this point I had started the patches and started using the mouth spray, and I had stopped smoking completely. But even at this point I could easily have succumbed to temptation or cravings, as I still had a nicotine addiction, and I was at this point only breaking the habit of smoking. So 3 days in, it was time to clean the bathroom, which was thankfully the only place I smoked indoors, from top to bottom to remove the smell and visible evidence of it being my smoking room. And having scrubbed everything to within an inch of its life, the bathroom was once again clean and nicotine stain free. This helped in making sure there was no subconscious triggers, for example smells, that could lead to a relapse. Cleaning was going to feature heavily in my process, as this is something that offered a good distraction first thing in the mornings during one of my key trigger points. After just a couple of days, I was sure that I was going to quit smoking, and I was giving it a good try this time, and it was time for the plan to be put into motion. First thing in the morning, when I get up at 6 AM to take my medication, this is when I started changing the patch. The patches were 24-hour patches, but you have to assume that they probably don't last that long and can dry out and become ineffective probably hours earlier. So the time between changing the patch and the new patch kicking in would probably be about half an hour, which is enough time to go to the shops and buy cigarettes because you're craving so hard. So what do? Well, I found that housework is a great distraction and takes about the same time as the new patch kicking in. You can substitute that for getting ready for work or whatever your day holds, but housework is handy to have in your pocket for days off and weekends. Breakfast follows, which again after eating was a major trigger point for me. So straight after breakfast I would go to the bathroom and get washed and dressed, and I found being in the bathroom and not smoking was hard and required a burst of willpower. In the beginning I found it worked better to fill my day with activity as much as possible, but avoided going out for the first 3 days, preferring to tackle any cravings I had in the comfort of my own home, and not outside where I could easily and quickly access a shop that sold cigarettes. So with the new routine and filling my time, the keystones of the plan were in place. But on a side note, it's okay to fall down at this stage. You're dealing with a nasty habit and a nasty addiction, but there is a point where you can't fail without destroying a lot of hard work. But it's different for everybody. You'll have your own set of triggers and you'll have to devise your own plan that works best for you. My second counselling session helped as I had someone to talk to who knew what I was going through, and someone who could advise me on my progress and the future progress. Also give me advice on the many pitfalls and possible hurdles that would get in my way. I got a lot out of the counselling sessions, and it even provided a reflection space on how I was doing, and I was pretty pleased with myself when I blew a 2 instead of the 18 for my first session on the breathalyzer. It didn't hurt that the infamous chart now told me I was a non-smoker, and the counsellor makes you feel they are on your journey too, and a lot of the time you're trying to prevent their disappointment as well as your own. So after 4 days I'd stopped smoking. I was still addicted to nicotine at this time, and still at the same level as before, but the habit was already starting to slip away. So over the next few weeks I managed to avoid smoking altogether. I was able to go to the shops, although I did use the self-checkouts, to avoid the dreaded cigarette booth at the tills. And the cravings were few and far between for me until the first cut in patch strength. And for a couple of days after the patch strength was reduced, I felt rough. And with that, the cravings seemed worse. And I have to admit, this was the first time in weeks that I could have easily gone and got cigarettes. But I managed not to do that and pushed through. At least now I knew what to expect when the patches were reduced even further. I tried not to focus on the patches being weaker as much as I could, and pretty soon they were working for me again. And I could feel my nicotine dependency starting to wane just a little bit. Just to note at this point, I hadn't really used the mouth spray much, finding that the full strength patches covered my nicotine needs, but I did start to use the spray a bit more when the patches dropped in strength, but not as much as I thought I would. But again, everyone will be different, and if you need it, use it. On quitting cigarettes, I had £400 extra a month, and that in itself was a huge motivation in giving up cigarettes. But I also wasn't going into shops every day, so I wasn't buying bits and pieces that I didn't really need. And this meant I still had a little bit left over when I next got paid. And by diverting this newfound wealth, I predict I will be debt-free by the middle of next year. It's also allowed me to put it to better use. I'm not sure this is classed as a better use of the money, but everything you see here has been paid for by the money that I saved in the first month. And it's allowed me to invest time and energy into a new hobby and avoid a lot of downtime where cravings would have become an issue if I was just sat twiddling my thumbs. Over the next few weeks I continued to blow 2s at every session, and I somehow managed not to fall down at any point. I found myself on the lowest dosage patches and seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. I was feeling good about myself and proud for getting here, but also apprehensive that I was going to be going out on my own pretty soon. Towards the end of the patches, I was advised to alternate days where I wore a patch and days I would go without it. I went patchless on the day I was due to start my final box of patches, and although I was feeling rough like I had done before, I felt confident the next day enough to go without again, and this was also day 60. So in the space of 60 days, I'd gone from heavy smoker to non-smoker. I call myself a non-smoker because that's how I feel. But I know this isn't really the end of the journey, but it feels like I'm getting there. Other smokers who have quit have told me that they still get occasional cravings, even years after quitting. So I'm prepared for that. And for the moment, not wanting to be a smoker and the benefits I've seen from not smoking even in this short time are enough to sustain my willpower to keep me going. So that's my journey so far, heavy smoker to non-smoker in 60 days. And I hope this video's given you something to think about or something you can try on your own journey.